The sky over New Haven burned red as enemy ships rained fire from above. Kira Veltan pressed her face against the command center window and watched her world die. The Korth warships hung in the darkness like giant metal spiders, their weapons lighting up the night with deadly streaks of plasma. "Shield generators are down to 20%, reported her aide, his voice shaking. The young Zalani's blue skin had turned pale with fear. "The northern districts are completely gone." Kira closed her eyes for a moment. 300,000 people lived in the northern districts. Now they were nothing but ash and smoke. She opened her eyes and looked at the tactical display. Red dots covered the screen like a rash. Each dot was a Korth ship. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a city. "How long until the shields fail completely?" she asked. 4 hours. "Maybe 5 if we're lucky." Lucky, Kira almost laughed. Nothing about this day had been lucky. The Korth Empire had appeared without warning 3 days ago. Their message had been simple: surrender or die. The colonists had chosen to fight. Now they were paying the price. The communications officer looked up from his station. "Still no response to our distress calls, Administrator. The nearest Galactic Council fleet is 2 weeks away. 2 weeks. They would all be dead in 5 hours. Kira walked to the window again and watched another section of the city disappear in flames. The Korth were taking their time. They could have finished this hours ago, but they preferred to let their enemies suffer first. On the surface, explosions shook the ground as Korth dropships landed. Thousands of armored soldiers poured out, their black uniforms making them look like insects spreading across the colony. The local defense force tried to fight back, but their weapons were no match for Korth battle armor. In the old section of town, Elder Nef Marklan sat in his study and wrote in his journal. His wrinkled hands moved slowly across the page as he recorded what he believed would be the last day of New Haven Colony. Through his window, he could see the bright flashes of weapon fire getting closer. "Today marks the end of our settlement," he wrote. "We came here seeking peace among the stars. We found only war. The Korth show no mercy to those who oppose them. Soon, our voices will join the silence of countless worlds they have conquered." The old historian paused and looked up as a massive explosion rocked the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. He could hear screaming in the distance. He picked up his pen and continued writing. "We sent our calls for help across the galaxy. No one answered. The council races are too far away or too afraid to face the Korth Empire. We are alone in our final hour." Miles away, in the colony's security building, Tim Jackson checked his rifle for the 10th time. The human exchange officer had been living on New Haven for 2 years, helping to train the local police force. When the evacuation ships left, he had stayed behind. Someone had to help coordinate the defense, and he was the only one with real combat experience. "How many people are still in the evacuation shelters?" he asked the Zalani officer beside him. "About 50,000 in the deep bunkers. Another 100,000 scattered in smaller shelters around the city." Tim nodded. "The bunkers might protect them from orbital bombardment, but once the Korth ground forces reached them, it would be over. The aliens were efficient killers. They would hunt down every last survivor." "What about the defense grid?" Tim asked. 3 turrets still operational. The others were destroyed in the first wave. 3 turrets against an entire invasion fleet. Tim had seen hopeless situations before, but this was beyond hopeless. This was suicide. He looked out the window at the burning city and wondered if anyone would remember New Haven after today. Far above the planet, in the cold emptiness of space, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Phantom and studied the tactical display. His ship hung invisible in the darkness, its experimental stealth systems hiding it from enemy sensors. The human frigate was small compared to the Korth warships, but it carried technology that most aliens had never seen. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park. "It's coming from the planet below." Morrison turned to look at her. "What kind of signal?" "Colony under attack. Requesting immediate assistance. The transmission is weak, but I can make out some details. Looks like the Korth Empire is hitting a civilian settlement." The captain frowned. The USS Phantom was on a classified reconnaissance mission deep in unexplored space. Their orders were clear: maintain radio silence and avoid contact with alien forces. Earth Command wanted them to gather intelligence, not start fights. "How bad is it down there?" Morrison asked. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez pulled up long range sensor data on his screen. "It's a massacre, sir. Korth battle group is pounding a small colony. Population centers are burning. I'm reading massive casualties." Morrison walked to the main view screen and watched the distant flashes of weapon fire. Each flash meant more innocent lives lost. He thought about his orders, then he thought about the people dying below. "Sir?" Lieutenant Commander Park was waiting for his decision. Morrison turned to face his crew. "Change course. Take us toward the planet." "Sir, our orders specifically state—" "I know what our orders say," Morrison interrupted. "But there are people down there who need help, and we're the only ones close enough to provide it." His tactical officer, Kevin Wright, looked up from his station. "Captain, it's an entire Korth battle group." "We're just one ship," Morrison smiled grimly. "Then we'll have to be creative." The USS Phantom turned to burning planet below, its crew preparing for a battle that would become legend throughout the galaxy. In the command center on New Haven, Kira Veltan watched the sky and waited for the end. She had no way of knowing that help was coming from the darkness between the stars, carried by humans who refused to let innocent people die alone. The USS Phantom moved through space like a shadow. Its stealth systems bent light around the hull, making the ship nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Captain Morrison stood quietly on the bridge, watching the Korth fleet through the main screen. 12 massive warships circled the planet like hungry wolves. "Distance to the enemy fleet?" Morrison asked. 2,000 kilometers and closing, reported Lieutenant Commander Park. "Their sensors are sweeping the area, but they can't see us." Chief Engineer Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked at his station. "Stealth systems are running hot, Captain. I'm pushing them past their design limits. We can stay hidden, but not for long." Morrison nodded. The experimental cloaking device was still being tested by Earth Command. No alien race had ever seen technology like this before. It was their only advantage against the overwhelming enemy force. Systems analyst Amy Chun looked up from her computer. "Terminal, I've been analyzing the battle pattern down there. The Korth are following standard siege tactics. They're methodical but predictable." "What do you mean?" Morrison asked. "They always attack the same way. Orbital bombardment first, then ground assault. They never adapt their strategy. It's like they're following a rule book." Wright, the tactical officer, pulled up detailed scans of the enemy ships. "Each Korth vessel is twice our size and carries 10 times our firepower. Their shields are military grade, weapons are state-of-the-art. By all logic, we shouldn't even think about engaging them." Morrison studied the tactical display. The math was simple and brutal. 1 human frigate against 12 alien dreadnoughts. Any sane captain would retreat and report the situation to higher command. But the people on the planet below didn't have time to wait for reinforcements. "Amy, how long before the colony falls?" he asked. The analyst checked her calculations. "Based on current damage rates, the planetary shields will collapse in 4 hours and 20 minutes. After that, the Korth will land their full invasion force. The colony will be overrun in less than an hour." On the surface of New Haven, the situation grew worse by the minute. Kira Veltan watched the shield strength indicators drop steadily. The protective energy barrier that surrounded the colony flickered like a dying candle. Each enemy blast weakened it further. "Southern shield generator just went offline," reported her aide. "We're down to 15% overall coverage." Kira closed her eyes and tried to think. There had to be something they could do, some way to fight back. But their defense platforms had been destroyed in the first attack. Their small fleet of patrol ships had been wiped out. All they could do was wait and hope. In his study, Elder Nefmor Clan continued writing in his journal. The explosions outside were getting closer. Through his window, he could see Korth aircraft flying low over the city. They moved in perfect formation, never deviating from their patrol routes. "The enemy shows no creativity in their destruction," he wrote. "They are efficient, but lack imagination. Perhaps this is why they have conquered so many worlds. Most races fight them using conventional tactics. But what if someone tried something different?" The old historian paused as another explosion shook the building. He looked at his words and wondered if anyone would ever read them. Back in the security building, Tim Jackson studied the tactical reports from around the city. The Korth ground forces were advancing on schedule. They captured territory block by block, never rushing, never taking risks. Their commanders were clearly following a standard invasion plan. "They're so predictable," Tim muttered to himself. "Same pattern every time. Same formations. Same routes." The Zilani officer beside him looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Watch their movement patterns." Tim pointed to the tactical display. "They always take the main roads. They always secure the high ground first. They never split their forces. It's like they're afraid to improvise." Tim had fought in several border conflicts before coming to New Haven. He had seen many different fighting styles. Some enemies were chaotic and unpredictable. Others were disciplined and organized. The Korth fell into the second category, but they took it to an extreme. Above the planet, Captain Morrison made his decision. "Danny, I need you to reroute all available power to the stealth systems." "We're going to get closer." "How much closer?" Rodriguez asked nervously. "Close enough to study their weak points." The USS Phantom drifted silently toward the Korth fleet. The enemy ships were massive, their hulls covered in weapon turrets and armor plating. But as the human ship drew nearer, Amy Chun began to notice something interesting. "Captain, look at this," she said, highlighting sections of her sensor data. "The Korth ships are maintaining perfect formation. They haven't changed position in over an hour." "So?" Wright asked. "So they're sitting ducks. They're so focused on following their battle plan that they're not watching for threats. Their sensor sweeps are routine, predictable. They're looking for what they expect to find, not what might actually be there." Morrison studied the enemy formation. The Korth ships were arranged in a classic siege pattern, with the largest vessels providing cover for the smaller ones. It was textbook military tactics. It was also inflexible. "What about their communication systems?" Morrison asked. Amy pulled up another display. "Standard military encryption. Very secure, but also very rigid. All commands flow from the flagship to the other vessels. If we could disrupt that signal, the other ships would be flying blind," Morrison finished. Lieutenant Commander Park looked up from her station. "Captain, I'm detecting increased chatter from the planet. The colonists are trying to coordinate their defenses, but they're losing ground fast." Morrison walked to the view screen and watched the flashes of weapon fire on the planet's surface. Somewhere down there, Tim Jackson was probably trying to rally the defenders. The colonists were brave, but bravery alone wouldn't save them. "Amy, I want you to map every Korth ship's power signature, weapon placement, and communication array. Danny, can you give me more power to the sensors without compromising the stealth field?" "I can try, but it's risky. If they detect us... Then we'll improvise," Morrison said with a slight smile. The one thing these aliens don't seem to understand is how to adapt when things don't go according to plan. The USS Phantom continued its silent approach, gathering intelligence while the battle raged below. In a few hours, the Korth would learn that humans didn't fight by the rulebook. They wrote their own rules as they went along. On New Haven, the shields flickered again. Time was running out, but help was closer than anyone imagined. In the darkness of space, a ghost ship prepared to change the course of the battle in ways that would become legend throughout the galaxy. Captain Morrison stood at the center of the bridge and looked at his crew. "All right, people. We're about to do something that's never been tried before. We're going to make 12 enemy warships think they're fighting ghosts." Lieutenant Commander Park pulled up the tactical display. "Operation Poltergeist is ready, Captain. First target is the communications relay on the flagship." "Remember," Morrison said, "we hit fast and disappear faster. We want them confused, not dead. A confused enemy makes mistakes." The USS Phantom moved silently through space toward the Korth flagship. The massive alien vessel hung motionless in the void, its crew unaware that death approached on invisible wings. Inside the ship, Admiral Vex Morlach reviewed the invasion progress with satisfaction. "Ground forces report steady advancement," his aide reported. "Colonial shields will fail within 3 hours." "Excellent," Morlach replied. "Maintain bombardment. Pattern: no deviations from the plan." The Korth admiral was a veteran of 50 conquered worlds. He had never lost a battle because he never took risks. Every campaign followed the same proven strategy: overwhelming force, methodical advance, complete victory. Amy Chun watched her sensor readings carefully. Target acquired. Communications. Array is exposed on the upper hull. Minimal armor protection. "Danny, how's our power situation?" Morrison asked. Chief Engineer Rodriguez checked his displays. "Weapons are charged. Stealth field is stable. But Captain, if we fire, they'll know. We're here." "Not if we do it right," Morrison smiled. "Kevin, prepare a micro-torpedo, smallest warhead we have. I want to knock out their communication array without destroying the ship. Right-arm the weapon." "Ready, sir. But once we fire, our position will be revealed for a few seconds." "That's all they'll get," Morrison said. "Fire." The USS Phantom launched a single torpedo and immediately changed course. The small weapon struck the Korth flagship's communication array and exploded in a shower of sparks. The blast was tiny compared to the size of the massive ship, but it cut the vessel's ability to coordinate with the rest of the fleet. "What was that?" Admiral Morlach demanded as alarms sounded throughout his ship. "Unknown impact on the communication array," his tactical officer reported. "We've lost contact with the fleet." Morlach stared at the tactical display. "Impossible. Our sensors show no enemy vessels in the area. Sir, the array is completely destroyed." "It will take hours to repair." The Admiral's face darkened. "Deploy. Fighter patrols. Something attacked us, and I want to know what." But the USS Phantom was already gone, moving to its next target. The stealth field had hidden the ship's retreat, leaving the Korth with no idea where the attack had come from. "Next target," Morrison ordered. "Supply ship on the fleet's outer edge." The Phantom approached a smaller Korth vessel that carried ammunition and fuel for the fleet. Amy Chun identified the ship's vulnerable points while Wright prepared another. "Precision strike. Fuel storage compartment is exposed," Chun reported. "One hit should disable their engines without causing a catastrophic explosion." "We don't want to kill them," Morrison reminded his crew. "We want to make them afraid." The second attack came without warning. The Korth supply ship suddenly lost power as its fuel systems failed. The vessel began to drift helplessly while its crew scrambled to understand what had happened. Across the fleet, ship commanders tried to contact the flagship for orders. When they received no response, confusion began to spread. Some captains maintained their positions while others broke. Formation to investigate. Another ship has been hit, Admiral Morlack's aide reported. The supply vessel Korth's Fist has lost engine power. Morlock studied the tactical display with growing frustration. How many enemy ships are out there? Our sensors detect no hostile vessels, sir, but something is definitely attacking us. The Admiral had conquered dozens of worlds, but he had never faced an enemy he couldn't see. Every instinct told him to maintain formation and follow standard procedures, but those procedures assumed he could identify his attackers. On the surface of New Haven, the colonists noticed changes in the enemy bombardment pattern. Some Korth ships had stopped firing while others seemed to be moving out of position. What's happening up there? Kira Veltan asked her communications officer. I'm not sure. The orbital bombardment has decreased by 30% in the last hour. Some of their ships appear to be having technical difficulties. Kira looked at the tactical display with hope beginning to stir in her heart. Technical difficulties? Or are they being attacked? In his study, Elder Nethmore Clan observed the changing patterns of light in the sky. The regular flashes of enemy weapons had become irregular. Some areas of space that had been bright with weapon fire were now dark. Something has changed, he wrote in his journal. The enemy's rhythm has been broken. Perhaps the old legends speak truth after all. Perhaps there are indeed ghost ships that sail the void. Tim Jackson coordinated the colony's defense from the security building. He had noticed the change in Korth behavior immediately. The enemy ground forces were still advancing, but they seemed uncertain. Some units had stopped to wait for orders that never came. Their command structure is breaking down, Tim told the Zilani officers around him. Someone is disrupting their communications. But who? One of them asked. There are no council ships in this system. Tim looked up at the sky through the window. Years of military experience told him that somewhere up there, a battle was being fought. A battle the Korth were losing. The USS Phantom continued its ghost-like attacks. The third target was a Korth destroyer that had broken formation to search for the mysterious enemy. Wright's torpedo disabled the ship's sensors, leaving it blind and vulnerable. That's 3 ships down, Park reported. The fleet is starting to panic. Amy Chun monitored Korth communications channels. They're trying to coordinate through short-range transmissions, but it's chaos. Different ships are getting different orders. Admiral Morlock paced his bridge like a caged animal. His perfect battle plan was falling apart, and he couldn't understand. Why? Deploy all fighters. Search every cubic meter of space around the fleet. Hundreds of small Korth fighters launched from their carriers and began searching for the invisible enemy. But the USS Phantom was already moving to its next target, using the confusion to mask its approach. Captain, Rodriguez called out. Stealth. Systems are running at maximum. We can't keep this up much longer, Morrison nodded. We don't need much longer. Kevin, target the ammunition depot on that cruiser. Amy, prepare for electronic warfare. I want to jam their targeting systems while we attack. The 4th strike was the most daring yet. The USS Phantom approached a Korth heavy cruiser and disabled its weapons magazine while simultaneously jamming the ship's ability to return fire. The explosion was small but visible, creating a bright flash that could be seen across the fleet. Another ghost strike, Wright reported with satisfaction. Admiral. Morlock watched the latest attack with growing dread. His ships were being picked off one by an enemy that might not even exist. But the damage was real. The fear spreading through his fleet was real. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly, perhaps we should consider withdrawal. Morlack's face turned dark with rage. I have never retreated from a battle. I will not start now. But deep in his heart, the Korth Admiral began to wonder if he was fighting something beyond his understanding. Something that existed in the spaces between the stars, striking without warning and vanishing without trace dot in the darkness of space. The USS Phantom prepared for its next attack. The ghost ship had begun its work, and the Korth Empire was about to learn that humans didn't fight fair. They fought to win. Captain Morrison watched the chaos spreading through the Korth fleet with grim satisfaction. 5 enemy ships were now disabled, drifting helplessly in space while their crews tried to repair the damage. But the USS Phantom's stealth systems were beginning to fail under the strain. "Power levels are critical," Chief Engineer Rodriguez reported. "The cloaking device is overheating. We need to shut it down or risk permanent damage." Morrison knew they were running out of time. The hit and run attacks had worked well, but Admiral Morlech was adapting. The remaining Korth ships were pulling into a tight defensive formation, making it harder to pick them off one by one. "Lisa, what's our status on ammunition?" Morrison asked. Lieutenant Commander Park checked her displays. "We've used 60% of our torpedo supply. At this rate, we'll run out before we disable even half their fleet." Morrison studied the tactical screen. 7 enemy warships were still operational, more than enough to complete the destruction of New Haven Colony. The USS Phantom had bought time, but time was running out. "Amy, bring up the holographic projector systems," Morrison ordered. Systems Analyst Chin looked confused. "Sir, those systems are designed for training simulations and diplomatic presentations. They're not military equipment." "Today they are," Morrison said with a dangerous smile. "I want you to project false sensor readings. Make it look like we have friends coming to the party." Chun's eyes widened as she understood the plan. "You want to create fake ships?" "Exactly. If we can't beat them with firepower, we'll beat them with fear." The plan was insane. The holographic projectors were never designed for battlefield use. They created images that looked real to the human eye, but alien sensors used different detection methods. Making the illusion believable would require precise coordination and a lot of luck. "Danny, I need you to reroute power from life support to the projectors," Morrison ordered. "We're going to create the biggest magic trick in galactic history." Rodriguez began working frantically at his console. "This is crazy, Captain. The power requirements alone could overload our systems." "Sometimes crazy is exactly what you need," Morrison replied. Admiral Morlech stood on his bridge and watched his fleet struggle to maintain formation. The invisible attacks had stopped, but the damage was done. His ships were afraid to operate alone, clustering together like frightened animals. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting multiple contacts approaching from the outer system," his tactical officer reported. Morlech felt a chill run down his spine. "How many ships?" "The readings are unclear, but it appears to be a large fleet. Estimated arrival time is 30 minutes. The Korth Admiral stared at the sensor display. The contacts appeared to be warships, but their energy signatures were unlike anything he had seen before. They moved in perfect formation, approaching at high speed. "Identify those vessels," Morlech ordered. Unable to determine ship class or origin. "The energy signatures are unfamiliar." Morlech's mind raced through the possibilities. Had the Galactic Council sent a rescue fleet? Were these ships from some unknown alien race? Or were they something else entirely? On the USS Phantom, Amy Chun worked frantically to maintain the illusion. The holographic projectors were creating images of 20 human warships, each one slightly different to avoid detection. The fake fleet appeared to be approaching from deep space, following standard Earth-Navy formation patterns. "The projections are holding," Chun reported. "But the power drain is enormous. We can maintain this for maybe 20 minutes. "That's all we need," Morrison said. "Kevin, prepare our remaining torpedoes. When the Korth panic, they'll make mistakes. We need to be ready to exploit them." Wright armed the weapons systems. "Ready, sir. But what if they don't panic?" "They will," Morrison said confidently. "They've already lost 5 ships to an enemy they can't see. Now they think they're facing an entire fleet. Fear will do the rest. The psychological pressure was working. Across the Korth fleet, ship commanders were reporting the approaching contacts to their admiral. Without communication with the flagship, each captain was making independent decisions about how to respond. "Sir, the destroyer Korth's blade is requesting permission to retreat," Morlach's aide reported. "Denied," the admiral snapped. "We stand and fight," but doubt was creeping into Morlach's mind. He had conquered 50 worlds by following proven tactics. Those tactics had never failed him before. But this battle was different. The enemy seemed to anticipate his every move. On the surface of New Haven, the colonists noticed the change immediately. The orbital bombardment had stopped completely as the Korth ships turned to face the new threat from space. "Their ships are moving," Kira Veltan observed. "They're forming a defensive line." "Defensive against what?" Her aide asked. Dr. Ray looked up at the stars with growing hope. "I don't know, but something has them scared." Tim Jackson watched the Korth ground forces through his binoculars. The enemy soldiers had stopped their advance and were setting up defensive positions. Their commanders were clearly receiving new orders. "They're going into defensive mode," Tim told the Zilani officers. "Something big is happening up there." Elder Nefmor Clan observed the changing lights in the sky from his study window. The regular pattern of weapon fire had been replaced by the movement of ships. He could see the Korth vessels repositioning themselves, preparing for battle. "The ghost. Ships have summoned reinforcements," he wrote in his journal. "The enemy faces a threat they cannot understand. Perhaps our salvation comes not from the known races of the galaxy, but from something entirely new." The USS Phantom continued to project its false fleet while moving closer to the Korth formation. The enemy ships were bunching together, making them easier targets for the remaining real weapons. "They're taking the bait," Park reported. "All 7 ships are moving into tight formation." Morrison watched the enemy fleet with the eyes of a predator. "They're thinking like soldiers instead of sailors. In space, tight formations are death. Traps." Amy Chun was struggling to maintain the holographic illusion. "Power levels are critical. The projectors are overheating. We're losing the outer edge of the fake fleet." "How long can you hold it?" Morrison asked. 5 minutes, maybe less." Morrison made his decision. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison. Prepare for final assault. We're going to hit them while they're distracted by our ghost fleet." The USS Phantom dropped its stealth field and charged directly at the Korth formation. For the first time in the battle, the human ship was visible to enemy sensors. But the Korth were so focused on the approaching Phantom fleet that they didn't notice the small frigate until it was too late. "Contact bearing 027, Korth sensor officer reported. Small vessel approaching at high speed." Admiral Morlach turned to look at the tactical display. A single ship was racing toward his fleet, but his attention was fixed on the larger threat approaching from deep space. "Ignore it," he ordered. "Concentrate all fire on the main fleet." It was exactly the mistake Morrison had been waiting for. The Korth had dismissed the USS Phantom as insignificant, focusing their attention on threats that didn't exist. Now the real ghost ship was about to show them the error of their ways. "All weapons, fire at will," Morrison ordered. "Let's show these aliens what happens when they underestimate humanity." The USS Phantom opened fire with everything it had. Torpedoes streaked toward the clustered Korth ships while the holographic fleet continued its approach. For a few crucial seconds, Admiral Morlach's forces were caught between reality and illusion. Unable to tell which threats were real, the gambit was working. The Korth Empire was about to learn that humans didn't just fight with weapons. They fought with imagination, deception, and the willingness to try anything that might work. In the darkness of space, a single small ship was proving that sometimes the greatest victories come from the most impossible plans. The USS Phantom's torpedoes struck the clustered Korth ships like lightning bolts from the void. 2 destroyers lost their engines immediately, while a heavy cruiser began spinning out of control. The tight formation that Admiral Morlack had ordered became a disaster as damaged ships collided with their neighbors. Direct hits on multiple targets, Wright reported with satisfaction. Their formation is breaking apart. Captain Morrison watched the chaos with grim pleasure. Keep firing, don't give them time to recover. But Admiral Morlack was no fool. The moment he realized the approaching fleet was fake, his rage became focused laser fire. The Korth admiral turned his flagship toward the USS Phantom with murderous intent. "All weapons target that human ship," Morlack roared. "I want it destroyed immediately." The massive Korth dreadnought opened fire with everything it had. Plasma bolts and energy beams filled the space around the USS Phantom as Morrison threw his ship into evasive maneuvers. "Shields at 60%, Rodriguez called out as the ship shook under enemy fire. "We can't take much more of this." Morrison gripped his command chair as another volley barely missed the bridge. "Amy, shut down the holographic projectors. Reroute all power to engines and shields." The fake human fleet vanished like smoke, but the damage was done. 3 Korth ships were disabled, and the others were scattered across space trying to avoid collision with the debris. "Sir, the flagship is coming about for another attack run," Park warned. Morrison studied the tactical display. The Korth dreadnought was twice the size of his ship and carried 10 times the firepower. In a straight fight, the USS Phantom would be destroyed in minutes. But Morrison had no intention of fighting fair. "Plot a course directly at their flagship," he ordered. "Sir?" Wright looked confused. "That's suicide." "Not if we do it right. Danny, prepare the ramming charges." Rodriguez stared at his captain in shock. "You want to ram them?" "I want them to think we're going to ram them," Morrison corrected. "There's a difference." The USS Phantom turned toward the Korth flagship and accelerated to maximum speed. From Admiral Morlack's perspective, it looked like the human ship was attempting a desperate kamikaze attack. "They're trying to ram us," Morlack's tactical officer reported with disbelief. "Evasive maneuvers," the Admiral ordered. "Don't let them get close." The massive Korth ship began to turn, but its size worked against it. The dreadnought was powerful but slow, while the USS Phantom was small and agile. Morrison used this too. His advantage, weaving through the enemy's weapon fire while closing the distance. 500 meters and closing, Park reported. "They're turning to port." "Match their turn," Morrison ordered. "Stay on their tail." The 2 ships danced through space in a deadly spiral. The Korth flagship fired continuously, but its weapons couldn't track the nimble human frigate at such close range. Morrison kept his ship in the dreadnought's blind spot, using the enemy's own bulk as cover. "What is he doing?" Morlack demanded, as the human ship disappeared from his forward screens. "They're staying in our weapon shadow," the tactical officer replied. "We can't get a clear shot." Amy Chun was monitoring the enemy ship systems from her station. "Captain, I'm detecting power fluctuations in their main reactor. Their rapid maneuvering is putting stress on their engines. Can you exploit it?" Morrison asked. "Give me a few minutes. I think I can overload their reactor controls." Morrison continued the dangerous dance, keeping the USS Phantom just meters away from the Korth hull. One mistake would mean instant destruction, but he held his course with steady hands. On the surface of New Haven, the colonists watched the battle with amazement. The orbital bombardment had stopped completely as the remaining Korth ships struggled to reform their lines. Some were trying to help their flagship, while others seemed unsure what to do. "Look at that!" Tim Jackson pointed to the sky where 2 bright lights were circling each other like fighting birds. "Someone's taking on their flagship." Kira Veltan watched the aerial ballet with growing hope. Who would be crazy enough to fight a dreadnought with a single ship? "Someone who doesn't know when to quit," Tim replied with admiration. Elder Nethmore Clan observed the battle from his study window. The two ships moved together like dancers, one large and powerful, the other small and quick. He picked up his pen and began to write. Today I witnessed something that will be remembered long after we are dust. A small ship faces a giant, not with superior weapons, but with superior will. The ghost ship has become real, and with it, hope returns to our darkest hour. Amy Chun worked frantically at her console while the ship shook under stress. I'm into their reactor control system. Their security is good, but it's designed to keep out conventional attacks, not human ingenuity. How long? Morrison asked, pulling the ship through another impossible turn. 30 seconds, maybe less. Admiral Morlack was becoming desperate. His flagship couldn't shake the persistent human vessel, and the longer the chase continued, the more his crew began to panic. This wasn't how battles were supposed to go. The enemy was supposed to follow the rules. Ram them, Morlack ordered. If they want to play collision games, we'll finish it. The Korth dreadnought suddenly reversed course, trying to catch the USS Phantom in a deadly embrace. But Morrison had been waiting for exactly this move. Now, Amy, he called out. Chun sent her virus into the Korth reactor systems, just as the enemy ship committed to its ramming attempt. The massive vessel's engine suddenly began operating at conflicting power levels, creating a cascade failure throughout the ship's systems. Their reactor is overloading, Chun reported. They have maybe 2 minutes before a complete shutdown. Admiral Morlack watched his control panels light up with warning signals. What's happening to my ship? Reactor instability, his engineer reported with panic in his voice. All systems are failing. We need to shut down immediately or risk explosion. Morlack faced the hardest decision of his military career. He could let his ship explode and take the human vessel with him, or he could surrender and live with the shame of defeat. Signal the fleet, he said quietly. General retreat. All ships withdraw immediately. The USS Phantom pulled away from the dying Korth flagship and watched as the enemy fleet began its withdrawal. One by one, the massive alien warships turned and fled into deep space, leaving their disabled vessels behind. They're running, Wright reported with amazement. The entire fleet is retreating. Morrison slumped in his command chair as the adrenaline left his system. Signal the colony. Let them know the threat is over. On New Haven, celebrations began as the Korth ships disappeared into the darkness. The colonists poured out of their shelters to see the single human ship that had saved them all. The USS Phantom landed at the main spaceport, where thousands of grateful Zilani waited to meet their rescuers. Captain Morrison and his crew stepped out to find themselves surrounded by cheering crowds. Kira Veltan approached the human captain with tears in her eyes. How can we ever thank you? You saved our entire world. Morrison looked at the celebrating colonists and smiled. We just did what any decent person would do. Nobody gets left behind. Elder Nethmore Clan finished his journal entry as the celebrations continued outside his window. Today, legends were born. Not of weapons or technology, but of courage and sacrifice. The humans have shown us that the greatest victories come not from following the rules, but from refusing to accept defeat. Within days, news of the ghost ship incident spread throughout the galaxy. Other alien colonies began to hope that if they were threatened, mysterious help might come from the darkness between the stars. The humans had kept their promise. No one gets left behind. The USS Phantom eventually continued its original mission, disappearing back into the void like the ghost ship it had become. But across the galaxy, people told stories of the day a single human warship had faced impossible odds and won through courage, creativity, and the simple refusal to let innocent people die. Some stories become legends. This one became both.